The U.S. Supreme Court will take up a legal challenge to the Affordable Care Act. The justices agreed to hear the case in October, meaning it is likely to become a major issue during the presidential election. The issue at hand is regarding the constitutionality of the law's individual mandate. So let's bring in CBS chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. She's joining us now from our bureau in D.C. So Jan, can you explain to our audience the significance of today's decision?
Sure. I mean, the Supreme Court said, all right, look, we've got this ruling in the lower courts. A group of states led by California had asked the Supreme Court to step in and essentially reverse what a lower court judge had done in eliminating the entire law. So the Supreme Court now is going to get another crack at the Affordable Care Act. They have upheld the law the last 2 times that they've considered it. But, of course, any time that they take a look at a different issue, it could be a different outcome.
Right. So as you point out, the law has faced some challenges prior to this. But what could the current makeup of the Supreme Court tell us potentially about how this could go?
Well, I think for Democrats, there's hope because the court that upheld those previous challenges and sided with the Affordable Care Act, those justices are still on the court, including the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and then, of course, the 4 liberal justices. This is a slightly different issue because the landscape has changed. So what happened and why this case is at the Supreme Court is a challenge, again, to the individual mandate. That, of course, is the requirement that all Americans have to have insurance or they're going to pay a penalty. The Supreme Court upheld that very controversial decision back in 2012 with John Roberts joining the liberals, which, of course, infuriated conservatives. But what happened in 2017 is that Congress actually made the penalty for not having health insurance 0. So they essentially said, all right, the individual mandate, we're getting rid of it. There's no tax penalty whatsoever. As a result of that, some Republican governors challenged the law again, said, well, look, if there's no individual mandate, then the whole law has to fall because that's really at the heart of the law. The lower court agreed. Then the Democrats jumped in and said, whoa, no, we don't agree with this lower court decision. Asked the Supreme Court to take a look at it, and that is the case that they will now hear arguments on in October.
And you mentioned the Democrats, Jan. They had hoped that perhaps this might be decided on before the election, but now we're hearing that this may not be, we may not hear arguments and a decision until perhaps summer of 2021?
That's absolutely right, Vlad. They had hoped that the court would hear it on an expedited basis. The court said no. So the arguments will be in the fall, in October, most likely, which, as you pointed out, really is going to be right in the heart of the presidential campaign. Democrats see this issue, health care, as a positive one for them. It's a way that they can try to appeal to voters because there are a lot of things in that law that are popular, like protections for pre-existing conditions, for example. So this is what Democrats see as a very good issue for them, and it's going to be very alive come October when the court hears arguments. Of course, in these controversial cases, they take a long time for them to decide. I wouldn't expect a decision until, like you said, certainly by June of a year from now, June of 2021. But it's yet another hugely controversial issue that the Supreme Court is taking on that will inject the court in the middle of the presidential campaign. This term, for example, they've got a boatload of controversial cases on everything from abortion rights, gay rights, President Trump's tax returns, whether he has to turn those over, gun rights, religion. I mean, you go on and on. So those cases are going to be decided this June, and then the fallout from that, and then come October, we'll have arguments here in the Affordable Care Act.
TBD. All right, Jan Crawford, always great to have you, Jan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Flab.